Good evening. My name is Bashir Fancy. I'm the Chairman and CEO of Canadian Information Processing Society. It gives me immense pleasure this evening to introduce Dr. N. Cavoukian, a CIPS Fellow, to present Embed Privacy and Security into your operations, gain competitive advantage. Canadian Information Processing Society has been around since 1958 and is one of the founding members of IFIP, the International Federation of Information Processing, as well as IP3, which is all about professionalism. Our partners are immense all around the world, and we are part of a group that makes up at least 50 countries. CIPS has the only legally recognized designation for IT professionals in Canada. Now, CIPS has been long recognized as a Canadian and a world leader in IT professionalism, ethics and integrity, governance. CIPS activities are mandated by a statute and rooted in the United Nations effort to create a truly global standards-based IT profession. That's where IFIP comes in, and we are very proud to be part of that group to try and bring best value, exchange values and ideas with our partners around the world so that Canadians and the others all get the best by sharing those values and knowledge. Now, very quickly, there are three designations here: AATP, ISP, and ITCP. ITCP, of course, requires that you not only understand the technology but also the business side and is globally recognized. I invite you to go to our website, cips.ca. You'll get all this information that I just briefly touched on. So to tonight's speaker, Dr. N. Cavoukian. She is recognized as one of the world's leading privacy experts, and currently the distinguished expert in residence leading the Privacy by Design Center of Excellence at the Ryerson University. She was appointed the Information and Privacy Commissioner of Ontario, Canada in 1997. Dr. Cavoukian served an unprecedented 3 terms as Commissioner. During that time, she elevated the Office of Information and Privacy Commissioner from a novice regulatory body to a first-class agency known around the world for its cutting-edge innovation and leadership. There, she created Privacy by Design, a framework that seeks to proactively embed privacy into the design specification of information technologies, networked infrastructure, and business practices, thereby giving the strongest possible protection. In October 2010, she was recognized by the regulators at the international conference, and which unanimously passed a resolution recognizing privacy by design as an essential component of the fundamental privacy protection. You will see all this come through as Dr. N. Cavoukian presents very shortly. And 2 important things I want to point out. One, that her work has been translated into 39 languages, and that speaks for itself. The second is the fact that the EU's GDPR, or Global Data Protection Regulation, which comes into force May 2018, includes her framework as key part in it. That tells you how her work has been seen around the world. Therefore, we are very privileged and honored to have Dr. N. Cavoukian with us tonight to present Embedding Privacy and Security into Your Operations. I believe you will thoroughly enjoy. Thank you very much for taking time to listen to this. And here's Dr. N. Cavoukian.
Okay, so now that it should work. So
Yes. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. Whenever I have a captive audience, I always want to start by trying to dispel some myths. There are so many myths out there that drive me crazy. This is probably the biggest one that drives me crazy, that privacy equals secrecy. It's about having something to hide. You've all heard that. Well, if you're nothing to hide, what's the problem? You have nothing to fear, right? Wrong. I always think that could have been the motto of the spouses beliefs in third life, because it implies that having personal space, things that you choose to keep to yourself, is about having something to hide. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Privacy is all about control. It's about personal control relating to the uses of your personal information, the information that you choose to share with others and keep to yourself. Freedom of choice is absolutely critical to privacy. I mentioned that privacy forms the foundation of our freedoms. Nothing could be more important And the Germans have a wonderful term for this called informational self-determination. In fact, they considered it to be such an important value, they enshrined it as a right in their constitution in 1983. That it should be the individual who determines the fate of his or her personal information. And the reason that is so critical is because context is key. No one knows the context associated with some information other than the individual themselves. They're the only ones who could determine whether they want to share information widely or keep it to themselves. I would say, look, privacy is not a religion. If you want to share your information, by all means, be my guest, as long as you make that decision yourself. And I often use myself as an example for this because I have shared a lot of very personal, sensitive information that I would never, ever expect anyone to share. But the reason I did it was because it was in my best interest to do so. Years ago, 2004, there was a wonderful new law. It was a bill being introduced in Ontario called PHIPA, the Personal Health Information Protection Act. In fact, it's such a great law that a few years ago in the U.S., when they were looking all around the world for one statute to base the revisions to their HIPAA, their privacy law, the only statute they pointed to was Ontario's HIPAA. That's how great it was. But going back to 2004, I did what I always do. I went around talking to stakeholders, doctors, physicians, and people, hospital workers, etc., telling them what a great bill this was. And after about the second or third time, I noticed I wasn't getting through the audience. I usually gauge the audience very carefully, and I wasn't connecting with them. Something was wrong. So I just stopped midway, maybe my third time, and I said, I'm going to stop because I really need you to tell me what I'm doing wrong. I'm not getting this messaging through to you as the most important messaging I can convey. Please share with me what I'm doing wrong, and I really want to correct it. And one young brave soul, the young doctor, stood up and he said, look, you're probably a good privacy commissioner, but you don't know what it means to be a patient. You don't know what patients go through. And I got it. He thought I was talking only as a privacy commissioner, and I didn't know what patients have to go through in terms of their ordeals. So I just stopped, and I made a decision that only I could make. I said to them, you think I don't know what it means to be a patient? Do you know how much neurosurgery I've had? Where they shoot me hair, they go in the head. I've got a small tumor that blocks the drainage of cerebrospinal fluid. It's right in the brainstem, so my surgeons have never wanted to go into to remove it. What they've done, though, they've created an alternate drainage system that will pump in my head and a shunt or two that drains in my abdominal cavity. And most of the time it works well. The only problem is, when you get a cut on your hand, scar tissue wants to form to heal it. When you have a pump in your head, you don't want scar tissue to form over the pump because then it blocks the drainage, and then you have to have surgery again. I had surgery about 6 times because of the drainage. Anyway, I would kill to have research that would zap the creation of scar tissue as soon as it formed. And I wouldn't have to go in and have my hair chopped off, my head cut into. So I'm giving this story to this poor doctor. And he's like aghast. He's like, but I thanked him profusely. I said, sir, thank you so much because you thought I didn't know what it meant to be a patient. I know firsthand what it means. And I would never elevate privacy above the needs of patients and healthcare. I want to give you both. What if I can give you the strongest healthcare delivery services with the cloak of privacy wrapped around it? You could have both. Wouldn't you rather have that? Everything changed. After that day, everything changed. Everyone supported the bill. They understood it wasn't privacy versus healthcare delivery. It was privacy and delivery of healthcare, always elevated. And that's been the heart of my work, is trying to get rid of the zero-sum model of privacy versus some other interest. Privacy versus security. Privacy versus research and health interest. I've just told you what a big fan I am of research because truly, one day they will find something that will prevent me from ever needing neurosurgery again, and they can just zap it. These are the things that will help millions of people, but we can do that and deliver privacy. You have to do both. That's the essence of the messaging. It's that simple and that difficult because this either or zero-sum mindset is so strongly part of the vernacular. It's amazing. Obviously, I think of privacy as a huge plus. And Truly, it is the foundation of our freedoms, and it breeds prosperity and creativity and innovation. Surveillance is the exact opposite. It's the antithesis of privacy, where people will engage in looking at a variety of activities you're relating to. And from a psychologist, that's my background, what it does, and historically we've seen this, it shrinks your cognitive bandwidth, meaning the kind of blue sky wild thinking you want to engage in, or to come up with innovative ideas and creativity, that all goes away and you go inward, you're scared, you're looking over your shoulder. It gives you the exact opposite of what you want for innovation and prosperity. Scopophobia is the term referred to people having a fear of being looked at. And Germany was the ideal example in their life because people were so scared. And everything stopped in terms of freedom, privacy, of course. And when that ended, they said literally never again. It is no accident that Germany is the leading privacy and data protection country in the world. It's no accident they had to endure the abuses of the Third Reich. And when that ended, they literally said never again, and they have stood up to that. I've been to many conferences in Germany during my 3 terms as commissioner, and every single conference is where it started with a reference to that time, and never again. Really, really important. Now, let me tell you a little bit about privacy by design. I call it the decade of privacy by design, because in 2010, it was unanimously passed as an international standard by the International Assembly of Privacy Commissioners and Data Protection Authorities. And let me say, commissioners have a privacy conference once a year, usually in Europe. In 2010, it was in Jerusalem, and we were all there. It was great, and I advanced a resolution. At the end of a 3 or 4 day conference, we had a half-day closed session where commissioners were allowed to bring forward resolutions to vote on. And what I noticed was, though, that we were no longer able to protect privacy just using our systems of regulatory compliance, which was after the fact. When you wait for someone to complain about a privacy infraction, you investigate, and then you offer some remedy. That's very important, there's no question, but it wasn't enough. In this day and age of ubiquitous computing, online connectivity, massive social media, wireless wearable devices, we weren't seeing most of the harms. And that's when I was actually surprised it was unanimously passed. And because most commissioners are what I call lawyers, wonderful lawyers who drill down into section 29.2 Part A and apply that to the fact situation in a wonderful resolution. And that is very important, but it was all after the fact. And then I realized that the reason everyone agreed to this, that we needed it to complement regulatory compliance, is because everyone knew that we were losing the game, so to speak, that the majority of the harms, I use the iceberg example, the majority of harms were evading or detection. If we were seeing the tip of the iceberg in terms of privacy harms, we were lucky. Most of the harms were remaining largely unknown, unchallenged, unregulated. And that's what we could no longer tolerate. And so we said regulatory compliance by itself was no longer sustainable for ensuring the future of privacy. We had to have proactive measures embedded into the design of operations, the design of systems of code, bake it into the data architecture. We wanted a different model, and that's where we started. And we've had great luck. We just, it's been translated into 40 languages now. We just got Urdu like 2 days ago. So I'm so excited because we're at 39 for the longest time. And it's, you know, people are so kind. I just, every talk I give, I reach out to people and I say, if you happen to have a language that's not up there, please come and talk to me. And people do. And you'll notice Armenian is there. So I would not do Armenian. But when I was commissioner, not a week would go by that I wouldn't hear from some jurisdiction about what they were doing in their respective area in terms of privacy by design. So it's very exciting. 2 essentials of privacy by design. One, that it's proactive, embedded into the design of operations proactively. The second is that you give up on zero-sum models. I mentioned this earlier. Zero-sum simply means you can have a positive gain in one area, always to the detriment of the other area, such that 2 total to a sum of 0. And in my world, it was never privacy that gained over security, for example. Nor should it be. But I sure as heck wasn't going to accept that privacy was always going to tank because you needed security. I want you to have both. Positive sum simply means you can have two positive gains in two areas at the same time. It's that simple and that difficult. It's getting rid of versus and substituting and, called the power of and. When I was a graduate student at U of T, it was a very exciting time. Game theory was really big. That's why I use this language. And Anatole Rappaport was there, the origins of game theory, and we talked so much about this, but there was an attraction to zero sum, possibly because it's much easier than trying to actually do two positive increments. I was always attracted to positive sum because, as I mentioned, I am an eternal optimist, so if you can have two games instead of one, why wouldn't you? This is the model I'm trying to advance, and we've had some success with it, but we have such a long way to go. And at the end of my talk, you'll hear about the new International Council I formed that I'd love you to join in an effort to try to get this moving faster. There are what I call 7 foundational principles to privacy by design. I'm going to go through it very quickly. I've already covered a lot of them. How important it is to be proactive, prevent the harm from arising. Privacy as the default setting. This is probably the most important. This is extremely important. And I want you to remember this because when I tell you about developments in the EU that are coming up in May, you're going to hear about privacy as the default. This is the exact opposite of what happens now. Privacy as the default means you, as a customer or a citizen, you don't have to ask for privacy. You are given privacy assurance right from the get-go, automatically. It is the default setting. Your information will only be used for the primary purpose intended, and no other uses of it will be made for any other purpose unless we come to you and ask for your consent for a secondary use. That's never the case now. Right now, it's the model of negative consent, where the assumption is the company or the government department can do whatever they want with it unless you take the time to scour the terms of service and the legalese and the privacy policy and find the opt-out box that says do not use my information for any other purpose. Well, we know nobody does that. Very few people do that. It takes too long to read and understand. Really, it's crazy. But do not for a moment think that that means people don't want privacy. I've got a few surveys at the end which I'll point to. Interest in privacy has never been as high as it is right now, after Edward Snowden's revelations. I've been in this business far too many years, way over 20 years. I've never seen polling surveys where concern for privacy was in the 90 percentile, 90%, 91%, 92%. I've never seen that. That's how high it has been in the last couple of years. People are very concerned about the privacy, and they don't know what to do about it. So when I talk to public service groups, I don't have to convince them anymore. It's actually the opposite. They start by saying, tell us what we can do about it. We want to know what we can do. And the easiest thing is never give out your information without asking what are people collecting and going to do with it. I always start there, and I put slow quotes. I drive them crazy. But I ask nicely, because, often they'll ask for your postal code or some other information. And I'll say, oh, could you tell me what use you're going to make of that information? And the postal code, she doesn't know. So they kindly bring a manager, and the manager comes, and we go through this exchange. The good news is, despite the fact that they rarely know what's going to happen, they take it seriously and they get back to me. The point of asking the question is to raise it on their radar. Put it on their radar so that they know there are concerned citizens who are interested, and simply say, I'm giving you this information for this particular purpose, which I'm happy for you to use, but please don't use it for any other purpose unless you come back to me and get my positive consent. Privacy as the default is critical, and you're going to see a lot of it in May of this year. Embedded in design speaks for itself. If embedded into the code of the design of your operation seamlessly, it becomes an essential component. I've talked a lot about full functionality, positive sum, so I'm not going to return to that. End-to-end security. Let me just spend a moment on this. The term privacy subsumes a much broader set of protections than security alone. But in this day and age of daily massive cyber attacks, if you don't have strong security end-to-end with full lifecycle protection, you're not going to have any privacy. Strong security is absolutely essential, vital. So we rely on this increasingly. Visibility and transparency. I go to great lengths to remind both companies and governments that it's not your information. You may be collecting information from data subjects. You may have custody and control over that information. It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the data subject. And if you're smart, you will be transparent and have that information visible to the data subject. Why? Apart from the fact that it's their right, it is good for you because the quality of the data, you're only going to know if you're incorrect mistakes, etc. If the data subject looks at it, they're the ones who know if you've got the right information or not. You make it accessible to them, they will gladly correct it for you, and you have much better quality of the information that you have. That's the win-win proposition of accessibility and openness. And respect for user privacy, I could have started with that as the first principle, because when you do respect the user's privacy, the data subject, then the rest flows for itself because you will go to great lengths to ensure that they are part of the operations. This to me is like motherhood, the seven foundation principles. This forms the foundation of whatever privacy policy or operation you're going to form. And it can take 100 different formats. This just forms the base of it. And from it flow amazing programs that I've seen over the years. And just in case you think, sounds good, you can't really do it in real life, right? Just a theoretical construct. Au contraire, what our privacy commissioner had to look on the ground right then and there. And we partnered, this is a compilation of 22 papers that we produced with all of the leading tech companies in the world. Think of a big tech company. Microsoft, Intel, HP, Oracle, IBM, of course. I know I'm leaving out a whole bunch. And we worked with them to produce papers in all of these areas because we wanted to show that this was real and doable now. That you could do privacy and security by design. We did 2 papers on privacy and security by design with Oracle. We wanted to show that this was eminently doable and it was real. We wanted people to understand this, and I think we've had great success with that. And once in a while, someone will ask me, as they did, I was in San Diego, invited to talk to San Diego Gas and Electric years ago. I was working on smart meters and smart grid. And they were having a lot of problems in California because unlike here in Ontario, the government passed a law that said you had to have a smart meter in the house to be able to. And I went to Dalton McGuinty, who was the premier at the time, and I went to him and I said, if you pass this law, of course, if you do that, I'm worried about the privacy concerns. May I work with the tech companies to ensure that we have the strongest form of privacy protection for all the wireless communications that could be potentially intercepted by others in terms of the smart grid and smart meter proposal you've advanced. He said, be my guest, make the best we can do. And we did. We produced 7 papers on smart meters and all the different ways we do this in the most private and most secure way so that the information could be used wirelessly, but only for the intended purposes by the intended parties. So we had a lot of luck with that. In California, they were also doing the smart meters, but they didn't have a law. Homes didn't have to receive this. And what was happening was the trucks would go into a neighborhood to install these smart meters. Several neighborhoods, the people on the street drove their cars up to prevent the trucks from entering into their street. They were so opposed to it. They didn't want it. They were really concerned about the privacy implications and everybody knowing what's going on in their houses, and they just objected. So San Diego Gas and Electric contacted them and said, would you come and speak to our board? Because we need a solution, and we're not getting through. We've heard you done some work in Ontario, so I did. And it went quite well. At the end, I think it was the CEO, he stood up and he said, all right, young lady, he's probably young lady. All right, young lady, now tell me, what's this going to cost you? And I'll never forget, and I said, with great respect, sir, you're asking the wrong question. You should be asking, what's this going to save me? Because I can guarantee if you don't do this, you're going to have a data breach, you're going to have a privacy infraction, and then you'll be paying for it all the way down the list. So yes, there is of course a cost associated with doing it upfront, proactive cost, but it will be a fraction of the costs you will incur when you have the breaches. Because it's no longer lawsuits, they're class action lawsuits. They cost millions upon millions. But far worse would be the damage to your brand and the damage to your reputation, which may be irreparable. The loss of consumer confidence and trust is such that you may not be able to regain it. And so these are some of the things that you have to consider. Anyway, San Diego Gas and Electric did privacy by design and touch wood. They've not had any problems. And I said, if you do adopt privacy by design, you don't keep it to yourself. You shout it from the rooftops. You meet with your customers and explain to them the lengths you're going to respect their privacy and protect their information. Your customers will thank you for it, and you will gain a competitive advantage because you've taken these additional measures. We've had a lot of success in different jurisdictions. JIPDEC is one of them. The Japanese Information Processing Development Center wrote to me just before I finished my last term as commissioner. And I thought, they said if Japan's private sector companies, that they insist on the principle of positive sum, not zero sum, and have become enlightened with privacy by design. And I thought, if they can understand the terms positive sum versus zero sum, and it's not their primary language, then surely the rest of us can do that. So we've had great luck with that. Now, I told you I was going to mention something from the European Union called the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR. It's been a long time coming, from 2012. It's going to be in effect in May of 2018, next year. And, here's the exciting part, for the first time ever, privacy by design, data protection by design, and privacy as the default, second foundation principle, actually appear in the statute. So they are going to have to, by law, do this, which is so exciting, only because it raises the bar dramatically on privacy. I was going to say, companies have been freaking out at the thought of this. And I understand, I actually sympathize with them, because it's the exact opposite of what they've been doing so far. But, in fairness to the EU, they've given them like 6 years to prepare for this. As you might imagine, very few companies have started preparing. It's sort of starting now. It's a little late in the game, but at least they're moving on it. So you're going to see some interesting developments next year. The data protection regulators. So in the EU, privacy is referred to as data protection legislation. So you have data protection regulators. They instead, they're going to take a firm line on this because we gave you 6 years to prepare. You haven't prepared, it's not our fault. So interesting times, May of next year, keep your eyes open. And now I would never be so bold as to say this, but Information Age said, it's not too much of a stretch to say that if you implement privacy by design, you've mastered the GDPR. As I said, I would never go so far as to say that. However, a number of companies have been calling me, lots from the US. One of the reasons is they used to have the safe harbor agreement, which allowed US companies, about 4,500 of them who subscribed to safe harbor, to engage in trade with the EU because it elevated the level of privacy and data protection they were offering customers, much more than the existing laws in the US required. Last year, safe harbor was invalidated. Max Schrems took the case to court, and basically he said, look, once now we learned all these revelations from Edward Snowden, it shows that they're not going to protect our data, and we're not going to have the kind of control that they say we're going to have. So the courts took this seriously and invalidated it. For the past year, there have been discussions between the EU and US on a new instrument called the Privacy Shield. Suffice it to say, there's not much agreement as to whether it is going to survive the court challenge, which is now also facing. So stay tuned on that, but the thinking, largely speaking, is that it will not survive. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean a lot. One of the things that leads is privacy by design doesn't require regulation. You can choose to do it and demonstrate. So I've actually been offering privacy by design certification because there has been an interest in that. Okay, I'm going to go really quickly because I think I've probably spent most of this time. I should be finishing up. Big data. I'll tell you all about big data. Which you've been hearing about increasingly. And yes, there will be enormous gains from the data analytics that arise from this, but it will also enable expanded surveillance. And that's what we always have to concern ourselves with. What does it mean when we have massive amounts of data that we can compile, definitely without the consent of the data subject? What does this say for surveillance? And it's not good. A couple of years ago, though, the big data dream started getting some negative information, that a lot of programs were sputtering or failing completely. They said big data is moving away from its inflated expectation based on trough of disillusion. That's really negative from Gartner. I love this one from Professor Spiegelhalter at Cambridge University, where he said, look, the problems you have with small data, you're going to get those in big data as well. But they don't disappear because you've got lots of stuff. They get worse. I thought that was very, very well put. The reason we used to engage in statistical analyses was for good reasons, because you need to ensure the quality of the data and the analytics you perform are sound. And as you know, data analytics in terms of big data, it's correlational. It's not causality, and we know correlation. You can't impute causality from correlation. So some people have been saying, forget about big data, what is needed is good data. And on that, I just want to mention one thing. Context is missing from big data analytics. You don't have the context. And as I mentioned, it will only yield, of course, correlations, which at times can be spurious. If you add context as a feature in the analytics, then perhaps you can impute causality, which will be huge in terms of the value of the analytics. So these are just some of the thoughts I'd like to advance, because I really love being able to point to causality as opposed to just correlation. Allow me to return to this point, because you wouldn't believe how many people say, well, privacy just stifles creativity and innovation. My God, it does the opposite. It breeds innovation, because you've got to be really smart to do privacy and fill in the blank, as opposed to privacy versus. That's why so many people are attracted to zero-sum models, because it's easier. You want to do both, it's harder, but way better. One of the years that I was privacy commissioner, I went around the world talking, I called it the year of the engineer, and I talked to engineers and software designers. So I want to be sure they could do what I was asking in terms of embedding and design, baking privacy into the data architecture, etc. Every single person I spoke to said, of course we can do that. We're smart. They're confident. You want that. But they said, wait a minute, we're not the problem. So they don't know what the problem is. The guys that give us the instructions to write the code for the program, they never tell us they want privacy embedded in this thing. So we write the code, we deliver the program, and then at that point they say, can you both want a privacy solution? After the fact, give me a vote. They say, look, we do what we can, but it's never as good as if we had seamlessly embedded it throughout the design. I mean, it's so obvious. So I always like to remind people, in fact, the year after that, I went around talking almost exclusively to boards of directors and CEOs, senior executives, saying, get rid of the silos. You've got to get the people all talking to each other, the legal people writing the policy, the people protecting, and you've got to get one messaging in terms of privacy and security and embedding it in design. So we've had good response to that. And these are just for your information, some of the papers we've done, big data, and other things. These are the enterprise architecture. We did the two we did with Oracle on privacy and security by design. We did one with Deloitte on how to embed big data. Khaled El-Imam, let me just tell you about him. He is amazing. He is one of the best, I was going to say minds, not only minds, one of the best people in terms of de-identification. See, you can't just de-identify data on direct identifiers, name, social insurance number, the obvious things. No, you have to do direct and indirect identifiers. It gets very complex. And Khaled has a company called Privacy Analytics, and that's all they do. And they do a beautiful job. They excel at it. And that's what's important, because people will tell you, I'm sure, we'll talk about just for a moment. The best way, you see, to have privacy is what's called data minimization, which refers to the minimization of the personally identifiable parts of the data. Once you remove the personally identifiable parts of the data, the name, or direct and indirect identifiers, SIN number, etc., then you have data, but it's no longer considered personal data for any legislation out there. So it will not attract the protections that you must have if it is personally identifiable data. It allows you to do far more in terms of research, artificial intelligence. There's so much more you can do with it. Public safety, security, be my guest. It's not personally identifiable. So data minimization is, and de-identification is one of the strongest forms of doing that. And there are all kinds of models using data aggregation, encryption, very strong de-identification protocols combined with a risk of re-identification framework. You have to do it properly. That's the only thing. This is an early paper that I did with Khaled when I was commissioner. All of this is available on our website if you have any interest in these papers. And the importance is just you have to do it. You can't think about it afterwards. You've got to do this proactively. It's the only way. I love talking about, I call it the myth of zero risk, because you would not believe how many people, and tech people, universities come to me and they say, nonsense, you can't completely de-identify data. 100% can't do it. They're right, you can't do it. Excuse me, tell me where you can get that kind of zero risk. You send your kids out to school, they have to cross the street, you tell them to look both ways. Things happen. Things happen. Risk, eliminating risk, is an impossible feat, largely speaking. So don't expect it in this area where it doesn't exist anywhere else. But can we significantly reduce the risk? If we could make it less than 0.03%, which is less than the likelihood of being hit by lightning, wouldn't that be an acceptable level of risk? I mean, to me, that's acceptable. I go outside when it's raining and maybe there's some lightning. I am not fearful of being hit by lightning. It's possible, but the odds are really remote. That's what I want you to create, and that's what you can create using Khaled's methods and a number of other risk-based approaches. Khaled's amazing. I mentioned to you that he does this work a lot. Years ago, in the States, there's something called the Heritage Health Foundation, where they make real clinical data from hospitals available to med students and other students. And the person who wins the prize is the one who can successfully predict which patients are going to be most likely to be readmitted into the hospital for one year. But they're dealing with real data. So they hired Khaled to de-identify the data. Strongly de-identify, of course, real patient data. He did this. He spent a lot of time on it. He cleaned up the data, de-identified, returned it to them. Unbeknownst to Khaled, they hired like a white hat hacker to try to break into it, try to restore the identifiers and identify these people. He couldn't do it. He was unsuccessful in doing it because of the links and the measures that Khaled takes. So I'll give that to you just as an example. It is possible to do. Zero risk? No. But incredibly minimal risk you can achieve. So these are just some of the risk-based approaches that are out there. You can take a look at them if you have any interest. You can innovate with de-identified data. That's the other key. Remember I told you I want privacy and data analytics, privacy and innovation. This is one of the ways by which you can do it. This is another paper we did with Khaled, so there's a lot of examples out there. I don't want to talk about IoT, but I feel I must. I have optimism in lots of areas, and eventually I will have optimism with respect to IoT. We're not there yet. Wearable computing, wireless wearable devices, quantified self, home automation and smart. Don't do it. If you have a house, do not buy, I would not buy smart devices from your home. Because they are leaking data to the external world and to third parties unbeknownst to you without your knowledge and consent. I mean, really, the home is your last bastion of privacy. You should have control over what information goes out. You won't yet. I say yet because people are coming to see the light soon enough, but up until now it's been like the Wild West. People are running out the door, trying to get the IoT devices out there, and it's so exciting. I don't look for exciting things. I just want you to embed privacy into it. So we're just beginning to talk to these people. Maybe it was to say, I'm not very popular in this area. But I'm working on it. It's not just me, obviously. All hardware-based devices, 100% trackable in terms of wireless wearable products. I mean, it's not just me saying this. Privacy and security should incorporate as a default standards-based privacy and security controls into their products and infrastructures, which they have not done. Federal Trade Commission in the United States last year looked at 12 mobile health and fitness apps to see where was the information going. It was going to 76 different third parties, all unbeknownst to the data subjects, without anybody's consent. That's just one example. And everyone's saying, we need a common privacy standard to ensure user trust and privacy and security. 24 billion IoT devices. I mean, don't hold me back. That's all I'm saying. But I think the tide is turning, but it takes time. And in the European Union, it's called the Article 29 Working Party. They address tech issues relating to privacy, and they said make privacy the default setting, follow privacy by design in terms of IoT. And once a year, I mentioned there's a Privacy Commissioners Conference in Mauritius in 2014. They said privacy by design should be the key selling point of innovative technologies. And the reason I like that is a positive, that it can be a selling point. You can use it to your advantage if you're an IoT developer. It's not just a negative. Build it in, build trust, attract customers. So the obvious, there is such a need to embed privacy into these devices by design. But we're just not there yet. And part of it is that engineers understandably are busy building these things. You need to have privacy people talk to that in terms of here's how you can do both. It's not one versus the other. You can do both. We don't want to impede your progress. We want to advance it. One of the first things I ask companies when I talk to them is, do you have a data map? It's a really simple question, and it just means when you have personal information walking in the door of your operations through customers, either filling out forms or if they're buying something, where does that information flow? To what third parties does it extend to? How does it, because once you have a data map, you can immediately visually identify where you need to get additional consent, where the information is going to be used for a secondary purpose that was never intended, where the third-party access may cause you harm in terms of data breach and unauthorized access. So these are just some of the things that you might want to keep in mind. Do you have a mitigation strategy? People have found this to be helpful. One example, which is an ideal positive example, TELUS, one of the major telcos in Canada, actually has gone to great lengths to embed privacy and security by design into something called Wellness Messenger, which allows you to have health information, for example, all on one device, retained very securely. I'm not going to go into the details. You can take a look at it yourself. If you want to access my slides, by all means be my guest. But I give you this as an example of the lengths that companies can go to and are willing to go to because they want to gain customer trust and they want to do right by the public. And this is an excellent example. And what they gain is trust, because building trust is really hard these days. Trust is at an all-time low. You want to build trusted business relationships. And I mentioned a few surveys earlier. Pew Internet Research did one 2 years ago. And they found that 91% of adults agreed that they had lost control over their personal information as consumers. I've never, as I said, seen data that high. And then, virtually the same year, Federal Privacy Commissioner in Canada, Daniel Tadhana, did a study. He found that 90% of Canadians expressed concern about the protection of their privacy. They were very worried about it. So, trust is fleeting. You want to build it, bring it to your customers, you're going to gain a competitive advantage. Because privacy is good for business, unlike what most people think. It is a real positive. I want you to frame privacy as a positive. that accelerates business. Now, I said this even when I was commissioner. I said privacy should be viewed as a business issue, not a compliance issue. Because then I knew businesses would be interested in doing a better job of it because it was in their best interest to do it. That's what you want. That win-win proposition goes such a long way. I am coming to the end, don't worry. I started something last year. I mentioned, so privacy by design, GDPR, everyone's been all over that. But here's what concerned me. Whenever you have an increase in terrorist incidents, which we've had, unfortunately, the last couple of years, starting with Charlie Hebdo, San Bernardino, Manchester, on and on, unfortunately. The additional unfortunate thing that happens is that pendulum swings right back to forget about privacy, we need public safety. Of course we do, but not to the exclusion of privacy. And I give this messaging out all the time, both to public and private sector entities. It gets very well received. But as someone I know very well said to me, "Man, an N of 1 is no longer sufficient. You know, get out there, and talk to all your international colleagues." When I was commissioner for so many years, we developed a lot of international colleagues. He said, reach out to everybody, develop a global privacy and security by design operation. So I don't want to say now, but anything that makes sense. So I developed an international council on global privacy and security by design. And we have amazing people who are founding members. Darren Entwistle, the CEO of TELUS. Michael Chertoff, who is the second Secretary of Homeland Security. He's amazing. Jill Tegerchov, who is the Director of EU Counterterrorism. And Greg Wolfman, CEO of SecureKey. These are amazing people. And they gladly, when I reached out to them, agreed to join as founding members because they understand the value of privacy and we are willing to kindly do this. So we've started this international council. That's the website. If you have any interest, please take a look at it. I would love you to go and look at it. And if you agree with the messaging of positive sum, not zero sum, please join the council. By joining, there's no cost. All it means is that you accept the messaging that we can do both and that we must do both. We're going to be doing a big release of this, a PR release in mid-October. So fingers crossed that it gains some interest and that we can get through to people all around the world. And I've had great success. I had colleagues in Germany who was commissioner with, they were commissioner, the federal commissioner and the commissioner of Berlin. I reached out to them, they're on. I've got colleagues in Japan, they've already signed up, they're giving me the. So if you go to the website, you already see some of the work that we've done. So fingers crossed, ladies and gentlemen, because I've missed my last conclusion. I don't know what my conclusions are. I'm sorry, they're gone. The conclusion would simply have said, please consider embedding privacy and security into the design of your operations in a win-win manner. You will gain by doing so. It's not just one versus the other. You can do so much more, and you will keep the customers you have, you will keep their loyalty, and you will attract new customers. It has to be a win-win for all parties. Thank you so much for your time, ladies and gentlemen. And there's my tweet. If you want to tweet and know what's happening in the morning, you'll follow my tweets and you'll know most of it. If you have any questions?
Yeah, any questions for
Yeah. So maybe we have the slides.
Oh, I'd love you to have the slides. Yes, please. Please, you can circulate.
Yeah, we'll make that
I'll be very grateful. And if you have any questions, just email me. My email is on there. I would be very, very happy to answer any questions you may have. Yes, sir.
Receive my privacy.
Oh, sorry, Sharon.
Should I receive my privacy or should I take my privacy?
That's a very good question. So, I think you should be offered privacy automatically by the state and by private sector entities. Having said that, what are the odds of that happening? At times, they're relatively low. So, I would like you to become active in collecting your privacy. Meaning, I don't want you to go out of your way, but ask questions every time someone collects information from you. Especially if it's sensitive information, health information, financial data, course, any kind of request for personal information. Because you are giving that information, of course, for a particular purpose. You're not giving information to a company or a government department to do whatever they want with it, to use it in any way they want. No. You are giving it to them for a particular purpose. It's often called the primary purpose of the data collection. And you have every right to say to them, may I assume, or probably you can't assume, could you please confirm that you will only use the information for this intended purpose, and you will not use it for any other secondary purposes unless you come back to me and ask my consent. As I mentioned, by asking that question, it makes a big difference, and it will alter their behavior. So you may have to do a little bit of both, sir. You may have to take your privacy, and hopefully over time people will extend privacy to you automatically. In the European Union, in May of next year, privacy is the default. That's going to change overnight. So stay tuned. Yes?
Thank you for slaying some sacred cows. I think a wise measure mind said sacred cows should be turned into sacred hamburgers. And I think you have shown that security and privacy and performance and risk, which in COSA framework, are on the opposite side of the same coin. This is not opposite. And I think too much in our cyber world is so up to lunch and today it drives me crazy. Like talking about all the crap that doesn't apply anymore. And you are so refreshing on this on the privacy thing. I'm grateful.
Thank you so much. You're very kind. Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am.
The legislation that's coming in the EU.
Yes, the GDPR.
Is it imminent anywhere else, or that's actually what you're trying to accomplish?
So the good news is it is in the EU and applies to, so here's what's changing. The 28 member countries of the EU right now have 28 separate privacy laws. As of May, those are all going to go out. They're all going to be replaced by this one overarching privacy law. So that's huge in and of itself. However, it extends well beyond the EU because all countries around the world want to do trade with the EU. So that's why the US is so interested in having something in place that will enable them to engage in trade with the EU. See, you only engage in trade with the EU after May of next year. You will have to have what's called adequacy with the GDPR, or essential equivalence, meaning whatever privacy laws you have in your country will satisfy the GDPR. We know that's not the case in the US, it's also not the case in Canada. We used to have adequacy under the foreign law, but we won't anymore. And the federal commissioner, Daniel Tamiya, has already gone to the federal government and said, we need to strengthen our privacy laws, which were in shortly after 2000, something like that. It's time to upgrade them. We're not going to have adequacy anymore, and we will suffer. So he's already pressing the government to ramp it up. So it has worldwide applications. Japan has been looking at it. India is looking. So in India, actually, was a wonderful Supreme Court decision to make it really fast. Supreme Court of India, 2 weeks ago, rendered a decision that people in India have a fundamental right to privacy. It was a unanimous decision on the part of the 9 Supreme Court justices, and it undid 2 lower court rulings which said the exact opposite. And this is huge in India. I don't know how many billion, roughly 1.6 billion people. They now have a right to privacy, which they've never had before. And this will be a big deal because there's a thing called ADPAR, which is this biometric system that they've introduced into India. And it's going to go through a lot of changes. So it will be very interesting. Stay tuned.
So it could be said that the European thing might start the domino effect.
Oh, for sure. For sure. That was an excellent point you made because it doesn't apply just to the EU, because other countries all around the world, Africa, India, Asia, they all want to trade with the EU. It will have a huge difference, certainly North America. That's why I'm so filled with hope. You guys gotta grab it wherever you can. Yes, sir.
Yes, you mentioned, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, that privacy can do both things of damage. But is there any sort of studies out there that you could point to that? Because I suspect there's a portion of the business leadership community that probably doesn't think so.
Yeah, if you go into that one paper, I told you where we operationalize privacy by design, we have several papers in there that show that. But here in in Ontario, it's not a business, but it functions like a business. There's the Ontario Lotteries and Gaming Corporation. The OLG runs all of the gaming, all the gambling in Ontario. There's 27 casinos run by the OLG. Years ago, they were having a lot of problems. There's something called a self-excluded program, where addicted gamblers can go through the equivalent of the 12-step program for addicts. And the last step is you go to the casino you frequent the most and tell them, I have gone through the 12-step program. I want to be put on your self-excluded list, meaning we know that gamblers apparently try to sneak back in on occasion. They get weak. If you see me sneaking back in, you have my positive consent to escort me out, get me out. Okay, what was the problem with that? The problem was the form that the person filled out and gave his positive consent and gave his picture resided in some filing cabinet in some back room and had nothing to do with the people in the front end. So these guys, I say guys because they're mostly guys. In fact, I'm not aware of any because I'm not trying to be sexist. These guys would sneak in. They would lose their life savings. They would lose their houses. They would lose their families. This is all horrible. But what's worse, they would then sue the OLG because the OLG didn't honor their commitment to keep them out. The OLG was losing millions. And so they came to, I was commissioner at the time, they came to me and they said, we think we have a solution, but you're not going to like it. So what they're trying. At the beginning of all the casinos, there are security cameras for security groups. They said, if we combine the cameras, capture a facial image with a facial recognition program because we have the picture of the individuals, then we can have a better shot at keeping these people out. Absolutely. What didn't I like about it? The biometric program will also be capturing the facial images of the recreational gamblers who you're trying to attract into the OLG as a business. That's the whole point, and they shouldn't be captured. So we worked out this wonderful program. So I didn't say no to it. So a win-win. Remember, positive sum. I said two things. One, the minute you know it's not someone who has subscribed to this program, you delete it right there. You don't retain any biometrics associated with recreational gamblers. The other thing is, I insisted that they use biometric encryption, which is the essence of privacy by design. Biometric encryption means you don't retain a template of the biometric, meaning the way most biometric programs work. Fingerprint, iris scan, facial recognition, they capture a template which captures the unique characteristics of your biometric. And they keep that in the database. So it means that anyone can access that if, let's say, even with a warrant, the police come knocking, they have a warrant, we want access all the biometrics you have to give it to them. Well, I wanted it such that this biometric image could only be used for one purpose, the primary purpose, which was, is this person on the self-excluded list? Biometric encryption, what it does is it uses the unique features of the biometric to encrypt some other data uniquely. The other data can be a meaningless PIN number, a 100-digit PIN number, an alphanumeric, it doesn't matter. But your actual template is not in there. So if the police do come running, or if there's a brute force attack, what do they get? They never get your biometric. They get your biometrically encrypted other data, which is meaningless nonsense. So it'd be my guess. So I insisted this is what they do. They agreed. They tested it for about a year, because it's not a slam dunk, as you might imagine. But they perfected it. They have it in place in all of their casinos now. They've had it in place for like 4 or 5 years. 0 cases going. And I should tell you the other good thing. If a person comes in and he is on the self-excluded list, he sneaks in. I said, you do 2 things. One, you got a positive match with biometric. Then you give it to a human live body to do an actual match as well to ensure that there's no mistake in the computer system. Then, once you're assured of that, you go up to the individual and you say, sir, we have a positive match. Is it still your wish that we escort you out of the casino? To give them one final chance. And what I've been told is at that stage, the guy's running out the door. They know he knows he shouldn't be there, doesn't want to be there, he's running out the door. We saved them millions of dollars because there were no more court challenges after that. I was foolish. I should have asked for a percentage of the thing. We have done so much more research with it. But it was a huge success. So that's just one example. You can make this stuff work for you. It really became a win-win.
But there was one case that was opposite to this. The customer win the $10,000 and she claimed that you have to pay me.
Aha! Well then.
It's recently because she signed that form.
Oh.
Because I worked in Bitcoin, so that's why I know this.
Wow. Amazing. Yes, sir. Just two.
I just wanted.
I'll get to you right next. Yes, sir.
I was just wondering about the flip side. Like somebody can hide behind privacy laws and sort of, deter transparency that is hugely required. The biggest instance I can say from top of my head would be Donald Trump and his tax returns.
Don't make me go there.
So, my fundamental belief is, had his tax returns been, disclosed, people would have had a very different opinion of him than they had at that time. So privacy, I get it but for a public person, a lot of has to do with transparency, and probably the same laws would not. Yes, as individual laws, I agree.
No, but we're on the same page. I was the Information and Privacy Commission. So I had oversight of freedom of information, which is making government records available to the public to ensure accountability and transparency. Very, very important. Privacy applied to personal individuals, personally identifiable data of private citizens. There was rarely overlap. So if you're a public official, like when I was commissioner, my life was an open book.
Yes.
Because, I functioned in that way, and people had a right to know certain things. I mean, they couldn't have accessed my medical records, as I said.
Sure.
I chose to reveal that because it served my purpose. I wanted this law back. But I agree with you that once you become a public official, it's not the same. You don't enjoy the same level of privacy as a private individual. I agree with that. Transparency is very important. But certainly in Canada and most jurisdictions with freedom of information, that applies to the records of government, to transparency, budgets, public policy, things of that nature that the public has a right to access. So I don't think we're really in disagreement. Yes, sir, I know you had a question from before.
Thanks a lot of conversations today. The laws around cloud have been project to where cloud technologies are relevant. And I wanted to find out what you comment quickly on just the latest thinking on topics of cloud, privacy and cloud, especially as it relates to data residency in Canada and US, because even in conversations very recently, the thinking is evolving very quickly.
Your cloud
Can you able to repeat the question for people online?
Oh, the question was related to what's happening with cloud and privacy. Information's in the cloud. Can you have that information retained privately? There's a lot of, and I don't have a good answer for you, unfortunately. There's a lot of differential thinking on this area. I think until recently, people have been very skeptical of information in the cloud. Some people argue you have greater privacy because it's not associated with a particular jurisdiction. Other people say you have no control over what's in the cloud. It's out there. How can you be assured of any confidence in terms of privacy, data protection? It really is a question mark. Just last week, though, I started reading several articles that were saying that privacy can, in fact, be dramatically enhanced by placing it in the cloud. And I haven't dug deep into it yet, so I don't have an answer. Do you have any thoughts on this in terms of direction?
Well, I think that that test case with the hunting and fishing licenses in Ontario was a very good one, and it articulated logical security versus physical location and protecting it through encryption and so forth. That's one we refer to a lot in Ontario when we're having discussions and putting agreements together for cloud services. But since then, I haven't found anything really concrete, authoritative that I can cite.
Let's see if I can tweet on it. Let me end with just one reference to encryption, which I don't spend much time on. You cannot have online communications, secure communications, without encryption. Encryption is absolutely essential to not only privacy, but the security of your financial records, your health records, your any data. Cyber attacks are massive these days. You have to have very strong encryption. You have to have all the software updates. And it is a myth that end-to-end encryption is somehow going to weaken anything in terms of law enforcement and public safety. If, as James told me, if he had been successful against Apple, which I thought he wasn't, people would have just gone to another jurisdiction and used encryption that was offered elsewhere. Encryption is one of the strongest protections we have. It is essential. And not only did Michael Chertoff, who's amazing, I love Michael Chertoff. We worked together many years when I was commissioner. We just spoke in Arizona together last year, and the title of his talk was Privacy and Security Better Together. I could have kissed him. I did, I was very respectful. But, and also Michael Rogers, who was the head of the NSA, they have both said it is absurd to think that it's one versus the other. You must have both, and encryption is absolutely essential to the protection of data, and we can, through law enforcement, do proper things to follow the leads we need to follow, to catch the bad guys. Of course we have to do that. But the way to do it is not through back doors. And if you haven't seen it, a group of 15 cryptographers, the leading cryptographers in the world, wrote a paper called Keys Under Doormats. And they use that title, Keys Under Doormats, to show that just as you might place a key in her doormat so your child can gain entry into your home if they lose their key, it will also facilitate robbers gaining entry. That you expand the opportunities for the bad guys if you create this back door, because you will create another port of entry. And it is just a dead idea. Take a look at the Fellow called Keys Under Doormats. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much.
So three things I want to quickly. One, those of you who came late, I want to remind you that we tonight awarded Dr. Cavoukian the CIPS Fellow. This is the highest designation we have, which for some years provided outstanding service to the ICT industry, and we all know that Dr. Cavoukian has in fact done that, you heard. And as I mentioned earlier, my very good friend Chris was talking about that he heard me say this 1992. I heard you say it for a long time myself. So it's a fantastic designation. I'm really glad that you are through this. Every time we hear you, you still keep people's interest with all new things, and so that's fantastic. So
Thank you so much.
The second thing I want to say, it would be remiss of me. We are here because of Behram Purb from Pricewaterhouse, who have been pretty strong partners with us and helped us. So thank you very much, Behram, for.
I'm a big fan of PwC, as David knows, so I'm very grateful to you.
Yeah, we have all of us have very good connection right from day one of my career too. So, which is actually kind of that's where I started.
Oh, excellent.
The other things, and Behram's assistant Tasha was simply outstanding. I don't know how she was getting things done, but including getting us into Wi-Fi when we were having all sorts of problems. But David and I discovered there was a COM 1 and COM 2. I never knew there was such thing after COM, but there was something we learned. This second. Learn more about kids because we do phenomenal stuff like this. Next month, as Behram Purb will tell you, we got 2 on blockchain, which is a phenomenal thing. So we got 19th and 22nd. And there's a lot more coming up. So we're really excited with this partnership we have with PwC because not only it's beautiful facilities, but it's the fact that we can work closely together and we are the same thing, trying to educate or share the knowledge, I guess, that we did tonight. In a few days, you're going to hear some very interesting thing we're going to announce. That's going to change I think it may have shared with you a little bit, but I look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.